You're listening to A Deeper Dive, a part of the Winsight Podcast Network.
What is going on with Big Boy? Hello, this is Jonathan Mays, Editor-in-Chief of Restaurant Business, and in this week's episode of A Deeper Dive, I speak with Tamer Afr, the CEO of Big Boy Restaurants, to talk about the state of the 87-year-old chain. Tamer has an interesting story. He had never been in the restaurant business until less than 5 years ago when he bought Big Boy as a potential growth opportunity. He then had to learn the industry while fixing a bunch of stuff with the chain. We talk about what he had to fix on the podcast and all of the things that the company is doing to generate sales. We talk about why the brand has so many different alternative names, such as Frisch's Big Boy and Bob's Big Boy, and how that's all related and how that happened. And we talk about the chain's new drive-thru concept that it just opened in Michigan and why the company is doing that. So we're talking about Big Boy today on A Deeper Dive, so please have a listen. All right, I am here with Tamer Afr. Tamer, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate it, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and about Big Boy?
About myself. So I'm born and raised in Michigan, became the CEO of the company about 4.5 years ago. Big Boy, Elias Brothers Big Boy, Bob's Big Boy, depends on where you are in the country. Historic brand, 87 years old. Originally started in 1936 by a gentleman named Bob Wyan in Riverside, California. We still maintain 5 locations out there in California. The brand grew, and I know a lot of people don't know the history of the brand, but it was eventually owned by the Marriott brothers for probably about 50 years. The brand got to, I believe, a little over 1,100 locations nationwide, and eventually, fractured over time and split and severed, and now we're left with what is called Big Boy, Bob's Big Boy, Elias Brothers Big Boy, which is our entity, and our sister company, Frisch's Big Boy, which is in Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And then we maintain the national and international rights.
Okay. So how does this relationship work? Because I think it's confusing to a number of folks, because you got Frisch's Big Boy, you got Bob's Big Boy, and
sure.
And so how is that maintained?
So in the states of Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, and Tennessee, we have a joint use of the likeness. So we can both use it. We can open up restaurants in the Cleveland DMA in Ohio and in Knoxville in Tennessee, and the rest of the states is Frisch's. The rest of the country, international media rights, licensing, all of that stuff is all of ours.
Okay. Now, how did that evolve?
That is a good question. From what I believe and what I was told of the story was back after the Marriott brothers decided to auction it off to all the franchisees. There were some larger than others. In certain parts of the country, in the South, you had Shoney's Big Boy. In, I think, Arizona, you had Azer's Big Boy. In California, you had Bob's Big Boy. In Michigan, you had Elias Brothers Big Boy. And in Ohio, you had Frisch's. So what happened was when the Marriott brothers auctioned it off, Elias Brothers were one of the smaller franchisees, but they won the auction. And they were at around 200-300 locations in Michigan. Some of the other franchisees didn't like working under what they saw was somebody that was, their equal or lesser in terms of size. So that's where the fracture started.
Okay. And so it ended up fractured in different parts. Have you been trying to sort of like bring these parts back together since then, or anything like that?
No, I'll be honest with you. So, quite frankly, we bought a restaurant company with no real experience in restaurants.
Really?
Right before the pandemic.
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, but that being said, we believe in the entrepreneurial spirit. We like learning. We like learning the challenges. We think it brings a different, fresh perspective. So when we first took over the company, it was, how do we right this ship and how do we take it going to the future, as opposed to, slowly dwindling in the past and die, which is what was happening. So we had to make some changes with the brand, make some changes all across the board, and then really reset and start to develop what we want the brand and what we want the evolution of the brand to be. So, I think over the last 5 years, we started pre-pandemic in a delivery push. We started in QSR. We started in a lot of different things. Obviously, the pandemic put it to a halt to us. And then, to be honest with you, we just keep evolving. And I think every day as we mature and grow in life and in business, we have to keep evolving. So, we've looked at not just the brand, but what we can do with the brand as a whole and as a company to be solid. So um, we've diversified, quite frankly. And so we've evolved the brand into a new drive-through concept that I think we just opened our first location. If you've seen some of the press on it, it looks phenomenal. It's a converted Burger King, drive-through Big Boy, focusing on the Bobs. So you're not getting brand confusion. So it's like an express Big Boy. It's doing great. Limited menu. One of the things that people didn't realize about Big Boy was we'd always made our own food. Big Boy was the original farm to table restaurant. So isn't that crazy? I mean, it's always been farm to table. I mean, that's our food's never frozen. Everything's fresh. I mean, so we looked at it and said, well, we have a commissary that produces all this food. How can we diversify this and evolve into a more food brand? So now we produce food for other restaurants and other services. So we've taken a look at our assets. We've done licensing deal to take our brand into grocery stores. We've done, media deals to get our brand placement here. We signed an international deal in Southeast Asia for 1,000 stores. And we're opening 10 in Thailand this year. So I think we're facing some challenges, but we keep evolving, and developing and building into more of a company than just restaurants.
Sure. All right. So a lot to unpack there. First off, I do have to make a statement on this on farm to table since you brought it up.
Yep.
And I have to confess, I hate that phrase. Can't stand it. It drives me crazy. Every restaurant's farm to table. Like until somebody, I suppose maybe, until we start making food in a lab, every restaurant is farm to table. So anyway, that's just sort of, I get the point. I totally get the point. I grew up like Big Boy is one of the earliest restaurants I ever remember. So to me, it's sort of a pleasure. But anyway, just all these companies that say that we're farm to table. McDonald's is farm to table. I've been on McDonald's farms, in fact. So it's sort of anyway.
Unique point.
But I want to get back. So you were not involved in the restaurant space at all before you got involved in this. That's fascinating.
No, we've been involved in a lot of different things. We've been involved in farms. We've been involved in we're a CPA firm. We've been involved in agriculture, sports teams, ice arenas. A little of everything, but no experience in restaurants, none whatsoever.
What were you thinking?
Honestly, yeah, right. Well, if I told you the whole story, you'd actually really ask me what I was thinking. I think my father has many times. But quite frankly, it's a historic brand, and it's just as you said. I grew up going to Big Boy, and it was one of the first restaurants I went to. And so, and everybody I meet across the country has a Big Boy story. It's a historic brand that I think was underperforming and, I just think neglected over a period of time. And I think that, we had faith in it and believed in the brand and saw what we thought it could do. And we took a shot, and hopefully we're going to keep going and keep expanding and take a different approach to it.
What was obviously there was the pandemic, but what was what did you, in the last 5 years, anything that sort of stand out to you about the restaurant business? Anything surprise you?
Yeah, a lot surprised me, to be honest with you. Aside from the pandemic, it's a tough business. It's a tough industry. It's a service industry. There's so many things. It's all about people, though. And so what I've learned, I've heard so many different things, and I took advice from so many different people on, well, you've got to renovate the restaurants, and you've got to do this, and this. And, we've done that, and you see no uplifts on the restaurant. And then you take a restaurant that you hire a phenomenal manager and a great team of people, and it still looks the same, but you get a 30% uplift. It's all about people. It's about taking care of people, and people want to be taken care of. And if you provide good quality food and clean atmosphere and take care of people, it's really that simple. I think we get lost in how difficult it is. We make it more complex.
Yeah. So, on a brand like that, so you said you make your own food, and how do you translate that to the customer? Because and it would seem to be one of the bigger challenges for sort of a legacy brand like Big Boy. How do you communicate that to the consumer? Because that's obviously a pretty important point.
No, it is. And I think, to be honest with you, I think we've got to do a better job of making it apparent, and these are some of the challenges. You asked me the challenges. The challenges are not just running a brand and a franchise, but how do you communicate with everybody at every level to your employees and let them know that they're doing that, because they are your army, they're your people. So we need to do a better job of that. Communication has not been our strong suit in getting that message out. We've been focused on fixing so much, not really getting that out. And so I think that's going to be our next biggest push. And as you start seeing more of our products in grocery stores and talking about the Big Boy story and what we do, and we used to do field trips at our commissary and show kids what we're doing. And I think we're going to get back to that. And I think part of our orientation for new staff and for new franchisees is going to be walking them through the commissary, explaining to them the Big Boy story. I guarantee you, if you walked into a Big Boy right now, most people don't know that Stan Lee wrote the original comics for Big Boy.
Really?
Yeah,
I did not know that.
That's what there's so much history with this brand. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's. I mean, as I said, it's one of the first restaurant chains I remember going to as a kid. Was a Big Boy restaurant. In fact, I still remember it clearly because the damn Big Boy is just seared into your brain, and just so. Such an iconic figure, actually, arguably, from a logo standpoint, is one of the most iconic figures there is in the space, historically, at least.
You're absolutely right. And I mean, I think that's, not, people not realizing that, not seeing it, and us finally looking at it and leveraging it. And, we were just in, Netflix, one of Netflix's top rated shows, Fubar, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, putting an ad in there saying, I had to go to Bob's Big Boy and get a shake. And, you see this stuff all the time. You don't realize it, but we're in TV and media all the time. I mean, the classic is Austin Powers, right?
I forgot about that.
But, right? I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah,
I mean, there's so much to it, and we get calls all the time. People want to write shows about Big Boy and want to get us in shows and movies, and so leveraging that and getting people to remember the brand in a positive way and nostalgic as we continue to build more restaurants in their area, I think is where we're hoping to go.
Yeah. Well, nostalgia marketing is actually a really big deal these days, and I think a lot of companies are really sort of getting that. They really get that. And there's a lot of people, obviously like me, but other folks who, remember what they grew up with, and it just gives them really good feelings and stuff like that. So, I mean, to me, it seemed like that's definitely an opportunity for you. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and it's great too. I get, I get text messages all the time from people all over the country, friends of mine who, one of my friends, he was in the middle of, I don't know where, Indiana, and he said that, and he sent me a picture of his friend's daughter wearing this vintage Big Boy t-shirt that she had no idea what it was, but she got it at a thrift shop and she thought it was the coolest thing she's ever seen. So I get stuff like that all the time, and it just, it's great. It's great. It's a great feeling to remember the nostalgia and try and get that out. I mean, we're also we're the first restaurant company to do an NFT. So I mean, we did the Funko NFT and we sold that out, and I think it was 7 minutes, I believe.
7 minutes?
I think it was 7. I think it was 7 minutes. It was sold out.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
there's still a lot of love for the brand.
Yeah. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about. So you said talk about this drive-through concept. What is it, and how is it different from your regular brand?
So the regular brand is typically sit down about anywhere between 4,500 to 7,500 square foot. Traditional family dining all day. Phenomenal food, but our traditional ones usually have a buffet style. Which is great on the weekend. Buffets strong. This is more limited menu, drive-through focused. About 35 seats inside, 2,500 square foot. It's fast. So speed of service is under 3 minutes. There's probably total about 17 items on the menu, but really there's 11. So it's really about new menu items. We hired some new R&D chefs. We put together some what I think are, personally, I think they're best in class. They really are phenomenal. I'm biased, but they are phenomenal offerings. And we're going to go after that model. We're going after the drive-throughs. We're the original double-decker burger. It's known for that. I mean, the Big Mac is taken off of something. I mean, so, if we can get back and still serve our core sandwiches, the Big Boy, the Super Big Boy, the Slim Jim, and then some of our new offerings. We have a meat lovers burrito. We've got, a fish sandwich that's phenomenal, cinnamon French toast sticks, handhelds that are great. I mean, just, so a little with the new and a little with the old, and focus on our cores. And
Mm-hmm. Did you have to, like, how long did it take you to develop an idea or a concept that would work well in a drive-through format like that?
We've been working on it for, I'd say, probably 2 to 3 years, quite frankly, and it's still evolving. We opened the first one, and I guarantee you the second one, which we're opening in about a month, will be a little different. The third one's going to be a little different, and I'd say until we're at 6 to 10, we're going to keep tweaking and making improvements, and again, keep learning as hopefully we keep doing.
So you're going to spend time looking at that and seeing, all right, how can we do this? What can we change the next time? And
yeah, I mean, quite frankly, we're fortunate in Michigan, fortunate or unfortunate, that a large Burger King franchisee closed down and left some great locations open.
I might have heard of one of those. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it gives us an opportunity to take some on like those. Where I think you'll see changes with us is, hours of operation, how we do certain menu items, timing for breakfast, things like that. And I think how we get better on, processing people through the line.
Mm-hmm.
I think menu offerings, I think we're there. Speed of service, we're there. So far, the model's been very successful. It's if you look at a construction cost for a typical big boy, which we've got one being built right now, we're over $3.5 million.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's because you're talking 5 to 7,500 square foot. I mean, you're talking a big restaurant. In today's market, that's what it's going to cost. These drive-thrus are costing us about 1.2, and they're generating the same amount of revenue as the one that's costing 3.5, if not more revenue, and and less staffing costs. So, which is obviously where everybody's looking at right now. I mean, that's an issue everybody's facing is staffing.
Right. Well, but it's one thing, I think, to take over a closed Burger King in Michigan versus like drive-through is probably one of the toughest real estate scenarios in the restaurant space. That would seem to be probably one of the bigger challenges going forward on something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it will be. But I mean, I think as you've seen, I mean, at least in the Michigan market, and it happens in every market, people come and go all the time, and concepts come and go. And I think you've got all the Sonics in Michigan closed for the most part. You've got Tim Hortons that closed that open drive-throughs. I mean, you've got enough concepts that, people are always, you've got Culver's just entering the market, Chick-fil-A just entering the market,
Really?
So Chick-fil-A's only got a handful of locations in Michigan. And, so, I mean, there's always going to be a fight for premium real estate for drive-throughs.
Yeah. Oh, you could become a 20-something unit chain pretty much overnight by taking over the Burger Kings. But
yeah, I mean, we could become. Yeah, I mean, we could. And there's Tim Hortons as well that we're looking at. And again, we're building ground up as well. So I mean, we've got 2 locations right now that are ground up, and then we've got other restaurants that are drive-throughs, non-Burger King, that we're converting as well. So,
right. Yeah.
To be honest with you, that's one of my tougher challenges. Is finding the real estate and the right real estate with drive-throughs. That is a big challenge right now because everybody's fighting the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Drive-through real estate is again really a brutal. It's a very difficult market right now, for sure. No question. That's the only thing I ever need. Right. Anybody I talk to who has to open drive-throughs tell me either something like, well, you can't build new drive-throughs right now, or it's really, really hard. Sure. And for a lot of different reasons. And partly is because we get a lot of companies that want to build drive-throughs because people like drive-throughs. Right. They say they don't, but they do. Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. That's what I tell people all the time. They don't believe me, but, yeah. I mean, I think it's McDonald's is probably, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 85% of its sales now through the drive-through, which is insane.
But you see that. I mean, I used to think it was weather-driven that, if it's Michigan, in the winter, I can understand that. But in California, nobody stops. Everything's drive-through. I mean, it's not weather-related. It's about speed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is it's the ultimate convenience. It's why delivery will never be as big here as it is like in Europe or in Asia, because we have so many drive-throughs, and you don't have to leave your car. Nothing quite is as convenient as like a hole in your wall that you hand the food out to the customers. That's basically roughly what it is. You throw some radios and stuff in there and the menu board. I'm really simplifying the drive-through. It's very bad. I'm going to get some phone calls on that, but it's a very convenient format, and and people really like it. And convenience ultimately in this business wins. It's really pretty simple stuff.
Sure.
Has been for sure. All right. I want to ask you about your international stuff because you said something I didn't realize Do you have a lot of international locations, or is that something new for you?
That's something new for us.
Oh.
So, and the company does, there are, I believe, around 257 in Japan that technically would have been under our, yes, I know. But in the year 2000, during the bankruptcy that ensued, apparently, someone forgot to send somebody over to Japan and we lost the rights.
Oh, my word. Really?
Right. Yeah. That was a big mistake.
Oh, yeah.
There's 257 in Japan that are operating roughly. Other than that, they're very successful, is my understanding. We signed a deal with a company called Destination Eats and Destination Properties. They're based out of Singapore, but they're a very large, organization that has the rights to, I think, Hard Rock and Hooters in Southeast Asia. And, they committed to 7 countries, up to 1,000 locations. We signed it, I believe, in January of 2019, February 2019, somewhere around that time frame. They slowed during the pandemic. Obviously, they couldn't open, but this year they're set to open. I think they just opened another one last week. They're set to open 9 more this year, so 10 total in Thailand. And I think they're going to keep growing at 10 to 100 a year for the next 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to keep expanding.
Huh. Would the Japanese, that's interesting. So would the Japanese Big Boy, would they be able to go in and start expanding into other countries? Like, is that like a potential threat there or not?
No, we still have the rights in all of the other territories.
Oh, all right. So you don't have to worry about that, but you just don't. All right. But that sort of proves out the concept that it actually Big Boy can work in other markets.
Correct.
And that should be and that's not something that they really explored for years before this.
No, like I said, I think the company was kind of on autopilot, just, running. And if it was, cash flowing and paying its bills, great. And, if it wasn't, it was, let's sell off the assets and just keep on moving. And that's what, when we stepped in, it was time to, we had to stem the bleeding to some extent. And then try and resurrect the company and resurrect the ship and look at what we truly had and what capabilities we had and what we could leverage and look at it a little different. Like I said, doing an NFT, we were looking at doing Roblox games. We're looking at, how do we really do things that are different to engage children? How do we do things that are different to, we're small enough at, 60-ish, 70-ish units to be able to be nimble enough to try new things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Were there some other situations that you encountered that you had to fix when you got there?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot, there's been, we've revamped the purchasing department. We've revamped almost every department, quite frankly. It's been a challenge, doing things the same way for, 80 some years isn't always the right way sometimes, and stuck in certain mindsets. So we've had to learn and evolve, and we've had to develop and again, even on the manufacturing side, that was a big challenge of learning that, this facility that we had capabilities beyond what we're using it for, and how do we leverage that and help smaller restaurant chains as well? Because, most restaurant chains, a lot of smaller ones, or a lot of restaurants, especially independents, don't have a commissary. And that commissary is so important for consistency of food and quality of food, so leveraging that and going out to some of these smaller restaurants or some of these smaller chains that don't have that capability, but that want that consistency to grow their brand, I think we're helping restaurants as well, and obviously helping ourselves grow too.
Mm-hmm. Now, does the commissary sell food to the other to like Frisch's and the other Big Boys, or not?
Just our Big Boys.
Okay. All right.
So just the Big Boys in our system, but we do sell food and prepare food for other restaurant companies and brands.
All right. Now, do you guys have 2 different menus like you and Frisch's? And I mean, how does that work?
We do. We maintain our own menu. Recently, Flattery's phenomenal because we have some good chefs. They've been copying some of our menu items, which that's a good thing. It means we're doing well. And then obviously we for us, we opened 2 stores in Nevada last year, 1 in Wisconsin. Nevada has a slightly different menu. California has a little slightly menu, and Thailand has a slightly menu. We vary a little by location. Some of the things never come off, but obviously the Big Boy and the Slim Jim are mainstays. Obviously the hot fudge ice cream sundae is big one, so that one doesn't come off. But we're flexible about adding some local flair.
Yeah. Well, I'd kind of hope that Thailand would probably have a different menu,
right? Yeah,
like Wisconsin.
Right.
that would seem to be. I mean, that's always the best international franchise brands. Have a small number of menu items that are you have to have it, and then
what the locals eat. Yeah, I mean, obviously in Thailand, chicken's a lot bigger than beef. So is pork.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to eat much of a hamburger. To be honest with you, they want more of a chicken sandwich or a fried chicken sandwich or the Slim Jim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
yeah, awesome, sir. This was great. I really appreciate you joining me on the podcast. Loved it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
And that should be it for this week's episode of A Deeper Dive, which was edited, as always, by Kimmy Kazmarek, artwork by Nico Hines. You may find this and other episodes of the podcast on our website at www.restaurantbusinessonline.com/article/deeper-dive. And you may subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or get the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jonathan Mays, your host, podcast producer, and the editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business. Thank you for listening.